might be thirding it, but
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Fox Hill.
yeah, thank you, Madam Speaker. It's my privilege and honor this afternoon to speak after the Honorable Prime Minister, who moved the motion on these appropriations bills, and it's my honor to second the first of these appropriations bills and to support the measures therein. And I want to make it clear that my support is 1,000%. I have had the advantage of reviewing the matters as they pass through the cabinet and to hear the discussions since the budget statement. And there's no question that this is a budget which indicates to the country that we have a prime minister who has a steady hand and a capable hand and is leading the country in the right direction. And so my support is full, and I wish the country well as we employ our way through this next year. This afternoon, many of the specific details about the Ministry of Foreign Affairs itself will probably come from the parliamentary secretary. But I wanted to deal with a number of policy matters with regard to foreign affairs and how I see foreign affairs in the context of the government and in the country. This, Madam Speaker, is my 32nd consecutive budget debate. The first of which was in December 1992, and now here in May 2024. Before that, I was a reporter and sat in the gallery where those two ladies are sitting now as a reporter. And so if you date back to 1977, I've been here, except for those years I was in law school, every year for these budget debates. And the question I would say to the public is this, very simple question. Are you better off today than you were 2.5 years ago? And to me, the answer is unquestionably yes. 2.5 years ago, we couldn't step out of our houses. And we had the leader of our country saying that if we were out 1 minute past 10 o'clock at night to lock us up, that's what we faced. 2.5 years ago, tourism was on life support. And now this year, tourism, there was a 37% increase in the number of tourists year on year, 23 over 22. And you can always tell when the country's doing well because you start seeing the US dollars show up in the cash register. That means there are people in town and they're spending money. 2.5 years ago, we remember the outcry from the public when a young man was fined $750 for selling coconuts. Another went to the pump and was fined $250 because he was getting water in the middle of a pandemic. And the interesting thing is, try as they might today, you can't disassociate yourself from a project in which you were involved, where you sat, you said nothing, we heard nothing, there was no dissent. So today, you can't say, it wasn't me. And that seems to be the direction in which we're headed. So try as you might, you can't disassociate yourself from what happened in the past. I want to, though, because I was away during the time that Loftus Roca's funeral took place, And I want to join the Prime Minister in the expressions of condolences on the death of Tommy Evans, who I considered a good friend and certainly an able advocate. So forgive me if I digress with regard to Loftus Roca. I asked the clerk of the House to produce a report which was produced in the House of Assembly, and it's dated the 11th of May, 1977. The general election in the year 1977 took place on the 19th of June, 1977. The House reconvened in October of 1977, and that was the first and only time that Queen Elizabeth actually came and formally opened the House and read the speech from the throne. But I start there because one day I was passing under the portico of the old post office building, and I met Loftus Roca on the porch. And he said to me that he had just offered his resignation to the Prime Minister. And I was kind of shocked at this. This is a man I saw every day. And I was figuring, well, what's happening with this? And he said that there was a committee of the House that had reported, and the committee date was the 11th of May, 1977. And that report had, in effect, condemned what he had said in the House of Assembly with regard to one of its members. And he felt, in the circumstances of the concluding paragraph of that report, that he ought to offer his resignation to the Prime Minister. What, of course, he didn't tell me was that as soon as he had offered his resignation to the Prime Minister said, "No thanks, you can stay as Minister." But that I learned that later on an announcement which was made by the Broadcasting Corporation later that evening. And it's very interesting to me, the people that I've actually come into contact with as a young Bahamian coming up into this great country that we built. And looking back, I almost can't believe that I actually knew these people up front and personal. I met him, I think it was the 1976 PLP convention. And Muhammad Ali was the last speaker before I spoke, so the room was full. And they weren't there to hear me, I assure you. But I was fortunate to have the full cabinet there. And after the standing ovation which took place, Roca walks up to me and he says, "If you are an honest man, I will support you." And that everybody who knows him knows that's the mantra. You have to be an honest man. So a couple of months later, there's regime change at Batelco. And I get appointed at the age of 23, 24 to the board of Batelco. Now, the thing I liked Prime Minister about being at this board was Val Grimes then became the chairman of the board. I was in my 20s, and what I really loved was they used to serve crawfish salad at the board meetings. And 20s, I couldn't believe crawfish salad. So I looked forward to that every month. The fellas who were sitting on the board were all senior to me. And they complained to my friend Al Dillette that I was a Loftus Roca clone. And Mr. Roca has a very stentorian, very tough view of life. And they said to him, "Tell your friend, we only want to be sure the fellas ain't teething, but don't carry these guys as hard as this." But as an impressionable young man, this is the impression, I was really impressed by Mr. Roca, his conduct and straightforwardness. And so he took me around the country. One lesson I learned, he told us there was no road to Salina Point. And we had to take a boat to Salina Point. Me, Bala Hanna, Curtis Hanna at the wheel, Roca, Wilbert Moss. I'm the only one left alive. And so we go on this boat. And he says, "We have to leave 5 o'clock in the morning." I Again, I'm in my 20s and I say, look here, man, 5 o'clock? I can't get up no 5 o'clock in the morning. He says, all I know is who don't get up 5 o'clock, get left. So 5 o'clock, I was up the next morning, and I learned that whoever's the head of delegation, if he sets the time, that's the time, and you follow what the head of delegation does. That's what you do. Never forgot the lesson. And I mentioned the 1977 report because I was saying to the Prime Minister earlier today, I didn't realize that the so-called Night of the Long Knives, where so many people lost their nominations under the PLP when Hubert Ingram was then the chairman, was actually so close to this event. So the election was the 19th of June. And this event precipitated the loss of the nominations of many of those persons who were seeking to run for the Progressive Liberal Party in the 1977 general election. And I wanted to point out the role which he played behind the scenes. So he becomes Minister of National Security in 1984. And just after, this is the Commission of Inquiry was reporting. And there was a meeting which took place in Chub Key. Following that meeting in Chub Key, there emerged a difference of opinion in the leadership of our party. And the then Deputy Prime Minister announced that on the 10th of October, he would be resigning office. I got a call from Mr. Roca, and he said, here's what's going to happen. Christie and Ingram are going to be dismissed. Smith and Nottage have to resign. And there's going to be a new ministry called Ministry of National Security, and that's coming to me. So I called my close friend, who was the mother of the now Member of Parliament for Angliston. I say, Ms. Hannah, you understand what's about to happen? And she said, no. She called Christie, maybe called Ingram, told them what was about to happen, and that's what happened. And he became the Minister of National Security, which was then the most powerful office in the Pindling cabinet. And I say that because, in retrospect, when you look at his reputation, where he became the go-to man on immigration matters in this country after his retirement from Parliament, that was the era of Loftus Roca. And he was a very strict Bahamianist, if you want to put it that way, and people remember him as such. There was a big row which took place between himself and Paul Adley over immigration policy. And both of them are my friends. And I remember as a young politician having to negotiate being friends with all sides. And I say that to younger politicians, that interacting with these people taught me the lesson of how not to be offensive to anybody, to try and get along with everyone in order to ensure that your objectives are obtained at the end of the day. Because all your voters are really concerned about is that you do the job for them, not how you get it, and not to make enemies with anyone. A valuable lesson indeed. My last interaction with him on an official level was 1987, when he decided that he was demitting office. And I got the opportunity to write his final speech to the House of Assembly. Hours and hours and hours of recalling what happened, his interactions with his colleagues, and it was a fascinating experience for me, and one again which I've never forgotten. And so I've taken this time out to mention all of those things because I think we have lost a good soldier, a great Bahamian, who helped to shape our country in its present form. Because we have a Minister of National Security, and that dates back, as I said, to what happened in 1984. His one request of us, and he was an ardent supporter of the now Prime Minister, came back into the front benches of the PLP to assist in his election campaign as deputy leader of the party. But his one wish was to have that school named after him in Acklands. And the Minister of Education and the Prime Minister were both down there. Again, I missed it, but I'm happy that that was possible to be done for him. He was an expert domino player, we can't forget that. And I was speaking to the Governor General, and she says it's a toss-up between who is the best, she or him. But I told her this story. I don't know dominoes at all. And he took me to Lily Boleg's place, Fonz's mother, in North Adams. They didn't have a partner in the foursome which is required for dominoes. So he forced me to play opposite someone that was chosen as the victim of his expertise. So I'm only matching cards. And I ended up winning the game. He was so upset. I don't think he spoke to me for the rest of the visit. But he was really a good domino player. And there's an iconic photograph taken of him in his latter years at the Potter's Key Dock, where he sat around that table playing dominoes. I don't think he could have imagined or his parents, when he was born in the 1940s in the Bahamas, that he would end up being the powerhouse that he was for our country, to the point where you had a prime minister and a cabinet marching to his graveside to say a formal farewell. So I want to record, Madam Speaker, and thank you for this digression, for a life well lived, and for a man who made a great contribution to our country, and may he rest in peace. Madam Speaker, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs was charged in the Blueprint for Change to carry out the following matters on behalf of the Bahamian people. And if you would permit me to read them. Commit to advancing the Bahamian interests abroad to create a Bahamian footprint internationally. Ensure all embassies have a trade and investment attaché to assist in attracting investments to the Bahamas and expanding trade. Participate actively at the UN with a view to securing a non-permanent seat on influential councils. Establish a Foreign Service Institute with the University of the Bahamas for training and development of all foreign representatives abroad. Fully implement Foreign Service orders. Actively engage and leverage the diaspora to contribute to national development. Implement international secondment programs for companies holding Bahamas work permits and others. Increase embassies, consulates, and airlift with strategic allies in Central and South America, Africa, and the Middle East. Commit to dedicated building for the permanent Ministry of the Foreign Affairs and strengthen international cooperation on climate change mitigation. And I think if you go down that list, we've ticked all the boxes. Signed, sealed, delivered. The Bahamas is a small country. That is a truism. And I say that because small countries have to be able to lift above their weight if they are going to be successful across the world. That is what the Bahamas under this administration has been seeking to do. I have a philosophy, and I repeat what I said at previous budget debates. I had a discussion with the financial secretary the day I took office. I said, these are the list of things that the Bahamas government wishes to do in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Do you have the money to support these programs? His answer was, if those are the government's programs, Ministry of Finance has to find the money to support them. After that, I don't need to have any more conversation with the Ministry of Finance. My job is to just get the programs done. Their job is to find the funds to support it. And I can say, without fear of contradiction, that the government has found the funds to support the work of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and adequately financed. And we've had considerable expansion. We now have a budget of about $50 million to do the work which we are called upon to do. And this is particularly important because the number one issue, which the Prime Minister says, the number one foreign policy issue for our country is the issue of climate change. Because climate change is existential for our country. And if we don't understand what existential means, I go back to that slide which the Explorers Club showed me when I was speaking in New York last September. If things do not reverse, in the year 2070, the island of New Providence will be 30% underwater. And if nothing further is done, in the year 2100, 70% of the island of New Providence will be underwater. That's what I mean by existential. And so the question is the urgency of now with loss and damage to pay for mitigation and adaptation. And you know, people give grief to ministers of works about the responsibilities for fixing the roads. But part of the reason the roads are so unstable today is because of the rising waters below the roads. So the calcium carbonate is getting softer, and more we're going to have to be repairing roads because it's simply not as stable as it should be. So that's the number one issue. And you have to be at the table. You can't be absent from the table. And so we have tried to be at all of the international meetings, and the Prime Minister has led the way in ensuring that the voice of the Bahamas is heard, that climate change is existential, and those people who are the major emitters have a responsibility to resolve this problem by providing the funding to ensure that we are able to adapt and mitigate what is coming afterwards. In terms of the fiscal performance, in the year 2021, when we took office, the deficit, the percentage of the deficit to GDP was then the size of the deficit was then 13.1% of GDP. Unemployment was at 17.6%, and the debt to GDP ratio was 100% or over. Speaker, in less than 3 years, the deficit to GDP is now down from 13% to 3.8%, and the debt to GDP ratio is 79.9%, down from 100%, and unemployment is down from 17% to 8.8%. That's a remarkable accomplishment in 3 years. Nothing to sneeze at. And, as I said earlier, the tourism figures reflect an increase of 37.9%, 23 over 22. And this has been done by the steady hand of a Prime Minister and a team, not just a one-man fight, a team working together to ensure that we have this good result. Madam Speaker, in terms of the international contacts that we've been making, we have had specific outreaches to Saudi Arabia, to the United Arab Emirates, and to the state of Qatar. And we have been involved in international relations in the Commonwealth, in CARICOM, at the United Nations, at the Organization of American States, and in the international financial institutions, including the Caribbean Development Bank. Our major trading partner is the United States of America. And there's not been a U.S. ambassador in this country since 2011. The prospect of a U.S. ambassador is not likely in the near future. The last charge Ushapitz left a couple of months ago, and a new charge is to arrive, I believe, on the 15th of June. In some discussions with the charge a couple of weeks ago in Washington, D.C., I basically laid out what the position of the Bahamas is, a small country with the United States of America. And essentially, there are no issues of note. What I said to them, though, there is an irritant. And I raised it, as I've raised in previous debates, this question of visas being granted for Bahamians to enter the United States. There are too many examples, in my view, of people who complain that the rejection of visas to the United States seems arbitrary and whimsical. And what I've tried to explain to people, Bahamians who come and ask me about this, is first, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has no say or influence over visas granted by the United States. What we do say also is that my understanding of their law is that the decision of consular officers is a subjective decision, not an objective decision. So essentially, if the fellow wakes up on the wrong side of the bed, you're hard luck. The only solution is to apply again. There's no form of appeal. But I've also said that my experience is the United States is an easy country to enter legally. Legal migration is fairly easy. Takes a long time sometimes, but if you keep applying, eventually you get through. I say this in the context of too many examples of people who simply take the decision, Bahamians, take the decision to stay beyond their time in the United States on a visitor's visa. And this causes enormous problems when you try to get a visa to go to the United States, because as I understand their current law, if you overstay, that is a permanent bar to your getting a visa to go to the United States again. So people ought to be very warned. There's no reason why Miami's only 30 minutes away. If the time is running out, jump on the plane and come home. Do not stay in these people's country over the time you're supposed to be there. And then rush to a minister of the government and expect us all out of breath to resolve that problem. It's not a problem can be easily resolved. Notwithstanding that, though, there are a number of cases which appear to us that have come to us that appear capricious. And to the extent that we're able to bring this to the attention of the authorities to see if they can review these cases, but in all cases there must be a live application before the U.S. authorities. So that's, I thought I should say that again. The other issue I want to raise some concern about is people who use the asylum laws of other countries to say they have a well-grounded fear of persecution in the Bahamas, usually because of sexual orientation. And then when they get to the next country, having gotten it, they find that life is tougher than they expected over there. And in many cases, it appears that this sexual orientation thing may be used as a ruse to get around these asylum laws. The point is that when you get to a country and you apply for asylum and you're granted asylum, remember that they take your passport. So you can't come to the Bahamas government and say, can you give me a new passport? And when we ask the question, who has the passport? Well, the government that you applied for asylum has the passport. On that basis, we can't give you a new passport. Because you are now officially a resident in another country. So I just say, be careful, people, how you make these choices of wanting to emigrate to another country. I am also, though, very proud of this fact. I met a lady who was recalling to me just at the airport in Chicago a couple of days ago that she used to serve my father as he was as he used to shop at city markets. She's a cashier. And she's coming home. And one of the things she explained to me in the conversations as we go back and forth is that she has 3 children who live in the United States, 2 PhDs, and one is, I think, a lawyer or a dentist. And I thought to myself, this has got to be an extraordinary, extraordinary country. That a lady who is a cashier from city markets all her life. I mean, you just gotta, you can't invent this stuff. And that's not a singular story. I can tell of the young man who grew up in Engliston, who is Bahamian and who is working for NASA at the lab in Pasadena, California, shooting rockets into the air. And so many other stories. And they all migrated lawfully to the United States. And one of the things we've been saying to the United States and all these countries, the U.S. is better than those because their scholarship system for athletes allows Bahamians to take the opportunity to go to schools in the U.S. and for their education to be paid and subsidized. But we've said to these developed countries, because Joe Biden, when he was then vice president down in Trinidad, told the Caribbean prime ministers who were complaining about the brain drain. And he said, well, you know, America's got the money, we want the best, and I'm not going to promise you we're not going to take them. So as fast as you produce them, and if they can come here, we're going to take them. That's the United States, and that's the developed world. So we said to them, but what is happening is that we are producing doctors, lawyers, Indian chiefs, all on the public education system of this country. So that means Bahamian taxpayers are paying for the education of these people who go and they get their education in the United States, they stay in the United States. The United States and other developed countries benefit from the expertise of these Bahamians. But it's the Bahamian taxpayers who are in fact subsidizing the development of the United States society. So shouldn't there be a quid pro quo of some kind, some official or formal support? The same arguments we're making with regard to the question of climate change. Just a thought. You will see in the estimates, Madam Speaker, 7.2 million, which are in the capital side of the ministry. And there are a number of building projects that the ministry hopes to be engaged in, one of which, of course, is the construction of a new parliament. Today, I'm advised that one of our members has had an operation on her feet, a knee. And there's no way for her to make her way up the stairs. So that is an example of how this building is inadequate and not fit for purpose. So, and in breach of the law, yeah. But, so what we've done now in terms of the reform measures to do with this, with the Parliament, is, as you know, the Parliamentary Service Bill has been passed. I'm advised it comes into force on the 1st of July of this year. And hopefully in perpetuity, it is separated from the executive in perpetuity and has control over its budget. And there is a committee of the Parliament which will now be responsible for its management. The government has already approved the first of the tranches for the support of the design of a new building within the Ministry of Works. And so you should be, those of you who will be members of this committee should have some things before you in short order with regard to what that should look like. I've said myself that there ought to be a proper facade so that you have an iconic place for photographs, that there ought to be an observation tower like there is in the Bundestag in Germany so the public can get up to the top and look over the city, that there ought to be a clock tower as there is in the UK. Just some of the features. And the idea is the land which is allocated is up the top of the hill where the old post office used to be. And that, I think, if we are able to do that, should be a signature building for the Bahamas and for this generation of political leaders. The point I've made before is we've been in occupation of these buildings since 1815. That was the symbol of wealth of the loyalists who came back here and set up this system. It's now time for us in the independent Bahamas to do what is appropriate as a symbol of our own order and era. So I'm hoping that that and the foreign affairs buildings will be able to progress over the next 2 years. There was an amendment which is coming on passports. And I don't want to give the wrong impression about this. It will provide the legal basis for people now to get their passports sent by courier. Unfortunately, it does not solve all of the problems in relation to that, because the passport as it is now to be valid requires a biometric. And if you have applied for the first time, there's not presently any way in the regulations to release that passport to you unless the biometric is there. And so we have this situation where, for example, Bahamians live in Vancouver. The passport is printed and applied for in Toronto, and the only way you can get it is you got to fly from Vancouver to Toronto. This particular thing does not solve that problem. So I don't want to give people the wrong impression. But what I have asked the officials to do is to look at a software solution which would allow the biometric to be included in the passport so we can resolve this problem. And it must be possible to do so by some software issue.
It's an online process where you apply online.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, it's all now. In terms of the expansion of offices, we have decided to set up shop in Abu Dhabi, which is the capital of UAE. There's going to be a consul general in Jamaica, so that professional diplomat will now run the office in Jamaica. Professional diplomat will also run the office in Trinidad and Tobago. And the Prime Minister is also thinking about some presence in either Southern Africa or Eastern Africa. As you know, Nairobi is where the United Nations Environmental Office is situate, and the Bahamas, given its position on climate change, may want to join our other CARICOM colleagues there. So just to indicate that those changes will be coming, we have a new Director General whose name is Jerusha Ali. She is the daughter of the late John Dean, who used to be the principal of St. Augustine's College and then the prior of the monastery when he was a Catholic priest, and my old English teacher at Calvary Green. So that's her daughter. Very, very able individual and making good changes at the ministry. And so I wanted to welcome her and to thank all of the officers really for the work which they do. One thing I've got to say again, you know, Nassau, I say to all officers, Nassau is home. And, you know, the rule is 2 terms, 3 years. Then you got to come back home. I can say that again. 2 terms, you got to come back home, because Nassau is home. And I think that's an important lesson. Section 5 of the Road Traffic Act is being amended. And I was reading it this morning. And I'm hoping that, or Section 5 of this amendment to the Road Traffic Act will allow motor vehicles where you're uninsured, unlicensed, will allow motor vehicles to be impounded by the police. Impounded is a fancy word for meaning they could grab it and take it to a lot and keep it. You remember when speaking on one of the crime debates in here, Madam Speaker, I indicated that I had spoken to the Commissioner of Police about two things that concern me. This thing of these kids not being able to control themselves at these parties on a weekend, and the use of the offense of affray in order to control these outbreaks. There was one which just took place in the parking lot of Waterloo over the weekend, which has been going around. Half a dozen to a dozen women, young girls, simply fighting, slugging one another with bottles, with everything that they can find. And the interesting thing about this phenomenon today is that the person is standing up there with a camera just recording it. No effort to try and stop it or intervene with it. It's just a form of entertainment. But this this amendment, seems to me will also be able to utilize for these kids who are prancing on these motorbikes. They can now, with the cameras, you can track where they go. If they're not licensed or insured, you're able to take them lawfully away. Right now, it's not lawful, although practice is something to utilize. But I thought that was a good development. The Inter-American Development Bank did a survey in my first term as minister between 2002-2007. One of the observations they made, Madam Speaker, was that the Bahamian public at large needed a form of public education. And the Prime Minister did some of it in his address here today when he was moving the statement, moving the address, on why we have to pay taxes. They did a survey along Bay Street here. And they said people said to them they couldn't figure out a connection between paying taxes and the services which they receive from the government. What's the connection? So there needs to be more public education on that issue. But I do know this, that this appetite which some people have for preaching about deficits and balancing the budget and all the rest of that, I think that's fine in its place and in its time. But I know that a small island developing state, if a hurricane hits and you got to fix the seawall, you can't be talking about balancing the budget and deficits and all the rest of that. And I always think about my late friend Norma Heald. One day I was watching TV. Oprah Winfrey was on TV, and she was giving advice, financial advice. And her financial advice was, pay the full balance off of your credit card bill every month. And I grumbled to myself, well, that's good for you to say because you're worth $2 billion, so you could easily do that. But I know my friend Norma, if she could get another set of credit, she had children she had to raise, she's a single mother, and it's a real struggle. Wherever you could get credit, you can get credit. And if you can pay the smallest balance, you do so, because you got to make it. And that's probably why that lady who's the cashier has those 3 kids now who are in the States with the PhDs and who are professionals in the U.S. because of the struggles of these women and men who do their best to make it. So I'm saying let's not get too much carried away with this appetite for that. I'm really pleased to see that there's an investment coming in Grand Bahama. One of the most vexing issues for me is to watch this city, which is by far my favorite place in this country, to watch this city going this way instead of that way. And the people who are the owners of the city are not performing the responsibilities under the Hawksbill Creek Agreement. And the government has no choice, because this is the second largest city. The country's statistics, the report from the census says that that island lost 5,000 people since the last census took place. So it's been losing population, not growing population, a city that was built for 250,000 people. And this should not obtain and cannot obtain, and the government has a responsibility. And so, two things I say. I applaud what's going to be done. I know that the Member of Parliament, the Minister for Parliament, has been working assiduously to get this special project off the ground. The African Export-Import Bank is going to be providing funding to do the study to develop this special market that she has in mind, and I want to thank her and congratulate her for that. But we must see growth in Grand Bahama. And I'd hope that members opposite would really support this investment to turn things around in Grand Bahama. Because we look at what happened during the 4.5 years. I think it was 5 of them in the cabinet or 5 in the House, and
A couple senators
the evidence just wasn't there of the growth that should have taken place in the city. So I hope that I'm proud of that idea and the investment, and I hope that it's supported by the side opposite as we support it. Madam Speaker, the other day I indicated here that we should save money in the credit unions, because a credit union is a good form of savings, which I did. But I received a call a couple of weeks ago now to say that there was a deposit, that the amount of money which I had deposited in the account exceeded what I said I was going to deposit on a monthly basis. And they wanted to know, where did the money, the extra money come from? And why was I putting this extra money in the bank? I was incredulous. I was absolutely incredulous. They said that, that's what I'm saying, the compliance people have to justify why, and then yesterday, I sent the messenger to go to the bank to make a deposit in cash. He was turned away and told that the bank does not accept cash. That I have to go with my card and put the cash in the machine using my card. Why do I need to go to a bank? For what? What do I need to go there for? And then the fool's errand, the abolition of checks. Now they tell us they're doing a study for 2 years. And I saw a committee has been formed of all the banks to teach us how to go digital within the next 2 years. Good luck on them. Good luck to them. In the Family Islands, there are alternatives to banking. There are alternatives to banking. No. But what I say is this, right? That you can add to without abolishing. That's the point I'm making. Add to, not abolish. And what I think also is that there's now a consumer act that was passed. So I'm wondering whether or not this instrument should not be used to bring a formal complaint, because the Central Bank Act says that these notes in my pocket are legal tender for any expense in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And yet we seem to be going headlong down this path where you show up to this place, I don't take cash. Show up to that place, I don't take cash. Show up to the next place, I don't take cash. So that's just my pet peeve. And there's the officer who works in the office of Prime Minister who calls me every Monday and says, stick it to them, stick it to them. So I've done my duty. I'm sure I'll get a handshake when I get. That's probably the only plaudit I'll get from this whole statement and address. Yeah. But that's the general tenor of what I have to say. We have a steady hand. There's not, any excitement or extreme on the one hand. We have a leader who's admired, broadly supported in the country, is known for having a listening ear, and who has a steady hand on the wheel of state as it moves forward. And that's what we want, because we want this project to succeed. And the message I have to say to all of us and to our country is, again, beating this into the ground. We have been badly served in this country by changing governments every 5 years. We've been badly served by it. Badly served by it. Now that we've broken the curse. Now that we've broken the curse. Now that we've broken the curse. 2026, 5 more years under the Progressive Liberal Party. 5 more years. And that is what this budget is designed to do.
5 seats in Granville.
This budget is designed to put us on the steady road to re-election in the year 2026. And, this ain't no Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. This is person by person by person, vote by vote in the box. And do not forget, put us here and why we are here. And we are going to march toward victory in 2026. We've got an able leader who will do so, and I'm proud to serve with his government. I support the budget, as I said, 1,000%. I have no dissensions on it, and there are plenty of elements which will help this country move forward. So as we work, colleagues, to make sure that the Member of Parliament for Marco City keeps his day job, as long as they will have him, let us applaud our Prime Minister for the work he's done. Thank you, and I so move.